talking about leadership, but not leadership in the way that you traditionally hear it spoken about. We're actually talking about the life side of things, the things away from your job, the things behind the success that actually really matter. I have a special guest with me today. Thomas, how about you share a little bit with our audience about why we feel it's relevant, especially for men, to start to focus on the self leadership piece?
It's a really good question. I mean, my journey, so I'm been in finance for 15 years now, financial advisor. Still have a financial practice, but focusing predominantly and more so on the coaching side of the equation now. And I think what we tend to do as humans is compartmentalize everything. And that's probably the biggest issue that I've seen when we talk about dealing with men's leadership in a way that's different is there's a lot of programs out there, there's a lot of conversations out there about men leading in work and business and how they build enterprises and build corporations and all of those kind of things. But what I've tended to notice over the last 15 years of working with couples is that there'll be men who, and not just men, but predominantly we're talking about men that produce and create and have power and leadership and work, and then they come home and they don't know how to channel that same energy. They don't know how to actually lead in the household. They have a hard day at work or a long day at work and it's a difficult situation. They pull some amazing maneuvers that save a company millions of dollars, and then they come home and the first thing that happens is their wife tells them about how terrible her day was or how difficult it was with the kids, and starts to, oh great, you're home, let me give you all these things to do. And the thought that sometimes runs through the head is, well, where's, like, man, like I was so respected 5 minutes ago, and now I step into this space and like nothing I do seems to matter. And there's not many conversations, or as many as I'd like to see, bridging the gap between those two conversations. And so you see a lot of really wealthy, successful men going through divorces, dealing with infidelity, sedating with alcohol, and scrolling on their phone or video games or things of that nature because they don't know how to deal with that dynamic at home. I saw that so much in my financial practice that I was like, what if I started coaching on this aspect? And then as I
Got
started
it.
thinking about coaching on this aspect, I had to do a really hard thing, Brian, which is I had to look at, how am I leading? That was not a fun experience. That was a very unfortunate, I learned a lot from it, but man, turning the mirror around and looking at myself and going, whoa, I'm not doing any of these things I've noticed need to be done.
That's an important point, Tom. It's just talking about how you show up, right? And I think that's one of the key components that gets overlooked. And again, as you talked about, there is this persona, this perception, this power that you may have in the corporate space when you're doing that thing. But how do you translate that to the home environment? And what's interesting is the mindsets that we tell ourselves. And I think that's the part of it that you got to realize too. I'm making great money, I'm being a good provider, etc., etc. But
Yeah.
then are you actually present in that home life, right? And
Yeah.
somehow we get this dichotomy going of, well, I'm providing, I'm making plenty of money. That should, lack of a better way to say it, be enough, right?
Right.
But it's not. And then you figure out, well, why do we have this disconnect at home, or why is there this tension that's there? We seem to be swimming in two different directions, and it's really all about how you're actually showing up in the relationships that actually probably matter the most in life
Yeah.
versus the success side of it. So about your just whatever you're willing to share about your personal journey,
Yeah.
and kind of how you had to process your way through getting to that point of picking up the mirror and going, holy,
Yeah.
and yeah.
It was a painful journey dragging myself across broken glass, and stepping on hot coals and all that. Metaphorically, but yeah, man, it was difficult. One thing to say about what you said is a catchphrase or saying that really lands for me is that a lot of times we think as men that the paycheck will be in lieu of the presence, but the paycheck never replaces the presence. And that's a difficult scenario to actually realize because we're supposed to be the provider. That's the societal role. But the more you provide, for most men, the less present that they are in the home. And ultimately, that's what matters most. But a lot of times they're blind to that. And then the question becomes, well, how do I do both? That's where there becomes a lot of difficulty. Well, difficulty if you're not actually creating frameworks and strategies like we were talking about earlier. My personal journey, I mean, I've been in finance for 15 years. I got out of college, I went right into finance, and I thought it was all math and numbers. I'm like, oh, I understand all the math and the numbers and the science of this stuff, so I can teach this stuff, and then start getting clients who just don't understand the math and the numbers, and life will be better. And then I started working with people, and I'm like, wow, math and numbers don't mean jack. Like they're not making any decisions based on math or numbers. It's completely off of emotions and instincts and biases and perspectives from previous issues that have happened. I remember distinctly one conversation I had with a lady where it was a budgeting conversation, and she was sharing. I asked her about her past, and she shared that her mom and dad got divorced. Her mom worked 3 jobs. She felt like she never got to see her mom. So now that she's working and making money, and her husband's working and making money, they spend all their money on their kids because they want their kids to never experience what she experienced without having her mom there to actually have those adventures with. And I'm like, man, this budgeting conversation isn't going to solve that problem. Like that's a deeper rooted conversation that has to occur, but the traditional finance world doesn't deal with that. So that was the initial like awakening. And then I got married, and I used to blame, this is one of the things guys do that I definitely did, was I used to blame her for all of our difficulties without realizing I had power to say no. So she used to spend tons of, I'd make a bunch of money. She'd go and spend the money. Anytime I would try to say, hey, listen, we got to be more intentional here, or we can't just like live on whims. She would say, oh, you're trying to control me like my ex. And then I would go, oh, I don't want to do that. So I would, take my foot off the gas and just watch the accounts deplete. And I'm doing all this hard work and having all these meetings and watching the account deplete. And I started to get burnt out. And as I got burnt out, I started to disengage. As I disengaged, I was no longer present. And so my lack of leadership had her lose the presence. And then when she lost the presence, she found it elsewhere. Now, I'm not saying like I'm at peace with it, but and I'm not saying that any of that was the way it should have been. Like she should have been working through the money, or she should have cheated, or any of that kind of stuff. But it's a natural byproduct of a lack of leadership. And so I own that I didn't lead that relationship. And I think that that's where a lot of guys get stuck, is they don't take that ownership. So that was the first relationship. Then I got married again, and I've noticed a similar pattern of disengagement on my side. Whereas things would get tough, I would disengage. As problems would exist, I would be passive aggressive and kind of make her the reason behind them. Spending, finances got difficult, I'd have it be her spending that was the issue. There's a lot of like similarities that way. So as I started to realize and look at my clients, there's 4 domains I break down into for conversation purposes with people. There's the body domain, like taking care of your body. There's the being domain, your spiritual connection, your purpose, your connection to God, whatever you ultimately want to call it. There's your balance domain, which is your relationships. And then there's your business domain, your ability to make money and produce wealth. And what I started to notice was my business domain was good, but all other domains were terrible. Like my body, I was 41% body fat. I was 260 pounds. The balance domain, we were constantly at each other, and I blamed her for everything. And then the being domain, I was burnt out again. I didn't have purpose. I didn't have clarity. I didn't have a connection with God. I definitely didn't trust any kind of spiritual conversations or spiritual connections. And then I started looking at my clients. I'm like, God, no wonder. Like as a leader, I'm a beacon. So the people I'm having as clients are having the exact same issues, of course. And I can't speak to it because I've got no personal power. That was the hardest look, like in the mirror, like looking at my body and then looking at the relationship and going, man, if I'm responsible, then this is all on me. And I can't keep blaming other people. Oh
So
man, that was painful.
let me ask this question because a common theme that I hear in what you're describing really revolves around trust. But
Yeah,
it's interesting because it's not really trust in others; it's actually trust within yourself. And just from the
yeah,
standpoint of owning it, trusting that what you're feeling, what you're thinking is worthy, it's legitimate, but then following suit and following through on those things from a trust and belief standpoint. What are your thoughts about that, and what's the relevance of having that type of just self trust?
yeah. That's a really good question. I think I think most people don't know how to trust themselves. Well, first off, like it's not something you can teach. It's not like trust yourself 101, right? Like like a course in college. I think trust comes with a willingness to be introspective. I think it comes with a willingness to look at where you're responsible for the patterns in your life. Like relationally, someone that keeps having the same money problems over and over in different capacities. It's the willingness to look at, well, where am I responsible for this compared to, wow, I can't believe this keeps happening. So if I'm living in the frame of victimhood where it all keeps happening to me, then there is no trust available because I'm just the victim of circumstances. But if I look at it from the lens of, well, where am I responsible? Where am I responsible for the last couple of relationships cheating on me? Where am I responsible for, the health issues I'm having? Where am I responsible for the reason I just can't seem to make money, no matter what I try to do? That's a window into starting to break the pattern. And that's a place where someone can start to trust. There is no trust without accountability and responsibility. You can never trust yourself if you don't know yourself as someone who's responsible and accountable. Why would you? Because there's no way to trust yourself if everything is happening to you and you're just in the sea of it happening. Because then if you were to trust yourself at that point, you have to admit, well, I had something to do with this.
That's an important point. Just the fact of the self accountability piece of it, and being introspective enough and honest enough with yourself to say, what role did I play in whatever's going on, financial things,
Yeah.
marital things, etc. Instead of, as they say, always pointing outward. How about we take some of that reflective time to really start to look inward and understand maybe how you're being perceived. And again, like we talked about at the beginning of this, how are you actually showing up or not? Because most times it's
Right.
what the issue is you're just not showing up in a way that feeds and nurtures the relationship that you're in. And so I think that's the key point. And again, dollars and cents are great. And it actually, as we all know, it makes life easier. But that's
Yep.
not what life is all about, especially when you talk about those types of relationships. You also mentioned in there a little bit earlier talking about having accountability, self accountability, and then obviously that in itself builds towards trust. What are some of the measurable tools that you've used or techniques to help give some structure so that you do have a way to go about measuring how you're showing up, where you might need to redirect or make some change?
Yeah. It's a really good question. Before I answer that question, one thing to say about the money piece, when you said, money gives you more options or can be better, what I've noticed is that money tends to be an energetic multiplier. And so what I've seen is that people who end up with lots of money who didn't have any level of responsibility or accountability tend to blow it up. And you see this with lottery winners, people that just randomly win hundreds of millions of dollars, and 2 years later they're broke. You see this with people that get wildly successful with a business and then blow up 3 relationships after that, or get wildly successful in business and then blow up their health and stop taking care of their bodies due to the stress, or become the other side of the equation, become egotistical and fanatical. Like, look what I did. I'm the only one that was responsible for this, and have that pride now. The egotistical, like dangerous pride. It's really interesting to just kind of watch how that dynamic works, when, especially in the conversation we're bridging here of money and leadership. And so, money. also becomes an energetic multiplier of leadership. If I'm not leading my family in a powerful way or leading myself in a powerful way, adding money to the occasion tends to create more chaos. That's a really difficult concept for most people to wrap their heads around, but I call it the chaos of abundance. When you don't have a lot of money, choices are limited. And so that's you can hide behind not taking responsibility and not having power. The moment you have a lot of money, now there's a chaos of abundance. There's too many choices. And if you don't have some kind of framework and some discipline, most people will blow life up. Go back into the pit of poverty where they don't have enough money because it was easier. So it's actually really weird. I mean, we could probably spend hours on that concept, but you look through you look through all the news stories about money and what people do with money, lottery winners and rich people that get divorced, and it's almost always that trend. Almost always. That's why getting yourself into a place of power and then multiplying money becomes much more powerful. So, sorry, back to your original question about the frameworks. The first thing that I have men do when we're working together, and it's usually in the mapping conversation, the first meeting, is I have them actually have to look at the truth of their situation. In other words, to stop lying about how good it is or how, okay it is or any of that kind of stuff. And we actually look at the facts of the situation. One of the things that we're really good at doing that I, as a coach, have to be really good at busting is sedating ourselves with delusions. And that's probably the most difficult piece. It's kind of like the matrix. Once you unplug, you can kind of see things a little bit more effectively. As long as you're plugged in, nothing anybody says is going to make a difference. So example of that is, having an initial conversation with someone and they go, oh, yeah, my finances are really good. Okay, great. How much money did you make last year? 200,000. Great. What was your net? Well, I don't know. Okay. Is that a problem that you don't know? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, how much did you save out of that net that you don't know? I don't know. Okay. How much debt did you rack up? I don't know. Did you rack up debt? Yes, I did. Okay. So help me understand why you think it's fine. Because it sounds like you're going a little backwards based on what you're telling me. Right? Oh, my relationship is fine. Great. How many times did you guys have sex in the last week? Oh, we didn't have it at all. Okay. Well, when was the last time you had sex? 2 months ago. Okay, great. And how many times have you argued in the last week? 3 times. Okay. So to me, looking good would be the reverse of that. You argue once in a month and you have sex 3 times a week. So is that something that you would prefer? Like, would that look better for you? Yes. Right? So it's kind of like just peeling back the layer on these things to deal with what's actually happening, because there is no forward progression from a position of delusion.
Totally see that 100%. And that's a great way that you explain that. Uh, And the thing that I've learned with my coaching clients too is it's that almost lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink kind of thing. It's getting those
Yeah.
blinders off, having them see or experience for themselves how they're showing up, what's their mindset like. And then you were talking a little bit ago about just the money and the finance piece. And there's this thing out there where we get in what we call this lack mindset. So when we have the money, because we don't feel like we're going to get it again. Either we hoard it under a pillow and we don't use it
Yeah.
efficiently, or we go out and buy the first Lamborghini because we feel we can, right? So
Yeah.
it ends up impacting one or two ways versus having more of a strategic, planned approach to how you want to manage your finances, understanding your finances, as you talked about. Well, what was your net and how much debt did you incur? And as you said, the average person is only looking at, well, I made X. Well, yes, but because there's so
Right.
many other layers to it that come into play with that.
Just to interject there on that
Yeah.
one too, what also I think makes me a little unique in the financial world is most financial advisors teach people how to hoard wealth, or at least hoard resources. My whole take is that resources are meant to be used. And what you're supposed to be doing is using them in the way that most effectively and efficiently achieves your self actualization. So for a lot of people, saving money into a retirement account and just sticking it away while they impoverish themselves today is not actualizing. It's not actually creating their highest and best version of themselves. So sometimes when my advice gets a little interesting is when I have to help people or give people permission to actually use their resources. And that's kind of outside the realm of most financial advisors, because most financial advisors believe the model of like, okay, you're going to be in this box, you're going to work this job for 30 years, and you got to make this much money over those 30 years, and then eventually retire, and then you can do things that you might like. Maybe you'll still be healthy too, maybe you won't. You'll have to live on less money because you didn't save enough, but blah 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 blah. And it's like, I mean, take me for example, right? I'm going to I've been in a lot of highs and lows financially over my life, from what I was sharing with my ex-wife, and then the current situation. I went from check in this last year. I went from um, buying out my business partner on the financial piece of the equation, which was hefty six figures. Then feeling called, based on everything I was seeing, what I was doing in my own life, called to open a coaching company. Started pouring lots of money into that. Then we moved to South Carolina and bought a new house here. And so I had this wild swing where beginning of last year, I was at 300,000 in my assets. And now I'm like at 30 with 100,000 in business debt. But it's not what I teach people is the same kind of deals. Like that doesn't stress me out because I can have two focuses. One is either, oh my God, how did I do this? I'm screwed, blah, blah, blah. Or the other focus is, great. Now, how do I turn that into more revenue? How do I take what I've done and thank God someone was willing to loan me some resources, because now I get to take that and 10x my return based on my ability to produce wealth. It's that kind of stuff, right? So money is meant to be used. It's an energetic multiplier. You're supposed to use it. To hoard it is to block the flow. That's where you see people with tons of money who never have done anything valuable in their lives or have never actually like lived in an effective way, that are so worried about losing those resources. It's because it's all they know. They've blocked the energy. Sorry, I just wanted to add that as far as what you were talking about.
No, that absolutely perfect, because that's what I call prosperity mindset. Understanding that the more of it that you do push out and do different things with and create with, that's where the return comes from. But again, if
Yeah.
it's just stuffed under a pillow, you're not using it effectively and efficiently, then that really puts you at a disadvantage, I think, and that's really what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
that's perfect. I want to go back to the frameworks, just real quick, because
Sure.
obviously when we're talking frameworks, a lot of people kind of the eyes roll up in the head, and it's like, oh God, here we go again, another system I got to manage, or this, that, or the other. Uh, how do you just keep it simple for your clients, but also make sure it has maximum impact?
Most people get it backwards. It's not a system for them to manage, it's a system to manage them. And that's the problem, is the flip on that. If it's a system, if I'm in chaos and I need to manage a system, well, guess what? More chaos. But if it's a system to manage me, that mindset flip, anytime I'm in chaos, it's an opportunity to realize that I'm not using the frameworks. So it's a trigger point on, oh, okay, let me go back to what there was to learn, or what there was to use, or what there was to do. So instead of hiding from it, people embrace it. It's such a small flip, but it's so important, because if you could manage the framework, if the purpose of the framework was for you to manage it, then you wouldn't need it, because you should already be effective. So having the framework manage you and submitting to the process, that's probably the hardest part for people, is actually surrendering to a process. No, no, I have my way of doing it. Well, your way has gotten you here. So let's stop that and do it this way. Right? That's probably easy. I mean, there's so many different frameworks out there, but it's kind of like, I hire a business coach. If I don't if I'm like, oh, I can't fit the framework of what the business coach is teaching me into my life.
See a lot of the same thing, but it is this illusion of control. We feel like
Yeah.
we need to have this control piece over whatever's going on, instead of, as you said, just saying, okay, I am going to follow or let this process lead me, versus me trying to control. the process. And
Yeah.
somehow we've gotten it into our mindsets that we can dictate the outcomes, which we really can't.
Yeah.
We can dictate the inputs and our actions that go in, but the outcome is going to be the outcome.
It's an interesting circular conversation of the more you discover, because no one can teach you, right? The more you discover how to trust yourself, the more willing you are to let go of the outcome because you trust yourself. If the outcome doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go, you trust that you'll be able to figure out why and alter, shift, hire the resources or hire the team to fix that problem. If the relationship, you let go of the outcome of the relationship, something in a conversation doesn't go well, you can evaluate how you showed up and trusting yourself and go, oh, I totally see why that didn't happen. But if I'm so focused on the outcome, I'm not trusting myself. The less I trust myself, the more I'm trying to control the outcome, the more I'm trying to put the guardrails up on the conversation. That's tends to be manipulative and a coercive energy. So let's imagine you bring that kind of energy into a relationship. Of course, that's not going to work very well, right? So it's this, most people have this negative spiral of lack of trust, trying to control via manipulation and coercion, lack of which doesn't work and breeds more lack of trust, more attempts to manipulate and coerce, more lack of trust, more attempts to versus trust in myself, letting go of the outcome, seeing myself as capable, more letting go of the outcome, life actually going in alignment because it's easier, then more letting go of the outcome and trusting myself. It's really what I think we're in the game of doing as coaches, is helping people discover that positive feedback loop.
So I want to move to something else that you kind of touched on a little bit when you were going through your financial piece and
Yeah.
explaining about the use of the money, and that's really being of service. And how about you share a little bit about how you use that in your coaching framework, why you feel it's so relevant from a being of service standpoint? And I think it's a little bit different than what most people think, because obviously you say, well, being of service means I go out and I volunteer to this or I volunteer to do that. And those are important things. But then we're looking at it, I think, from a different perspective and at a different level. So share a little bit about that.
Well, that's a great question, and just to make sure I'm on point with you, what's the level you feel like we're looking at it at?
So being of service for me, I'm seeing it as how we're engaged with the people around us. So it's not that we
Mm,
necessarily have to go out and be in support of a cause. It is being of service to just others in general. So think of it, I guess, more of just being outward focused, being open and
yeah,
receptive, getting away from some of those judgmental or prejudged things that we may bring to the table, and just allowing ourselves to quote unquote be there, be present, be in the moment, and see where that takes us, where that leads us. Because so many times we approach things, we already have these walls built, which actually prevents, as you talked about with the money, you're blocking the flow of
yeah.
what could potentially be there for you. So that is how I see when someone says be of service. It's really just that openness and that willingness to be present, be in the moment, and stay engaged.
No, I love it. Yeah, I guess with that perspective, what I would add is, because of the money part of the equation, is the realization that all this is why I love capitalism. There's a lot of negative and misunderstanding about capitalism, but the reality is that one of the greatest ways to be of service to people is to create a business that fits a need and fills a need, or satisfies a want, or even handles a need people didn't even know existed. And then if I'm an employee or working with a company, like, I can take the position that my job, like, I'm not just generating resources to consume, that I am actually participating in a process of service, right? Because that company wouldn't exist if it wasn't fulfilling some sort of need or some sort of service that makes a difference for other people. Even as simple, I mean, capitalism is neutral. There's things that are not so great for society that occur, but just taking the case that over periods of time, like, people have agency, they can make their own choices, right? And so in that respect, I'm still contributing in some capacity because I'm helping people make choices. So there's number one, like, to me, a be of service, creating companies, participating in the metrics by which society evolves and elevates in economic forums, I think is amazing. And I think most people just don't see life from that perspective. Just like, oh, I got to go to my job and I hate my job and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, what if you viewed it as you're actually having an act of service and being compensated for it? I think that's pretty cool. The second piece of that equation of like, just what does it look like to be of service in life? I think it comes down to one word for me anyway, is curiosity. The reason I say curiosity is because if you think of how a conversation generally works, for most people, you're not actually talking to another person. So, example, there'll be people listening to this podcast that while they're listening to us, they'll be going, I don't know if I agree with what Thomas has said. What Brian said didn't really make much sense. What does this even, what's the point of this? What does leadership mean? Like, I don't know. Or, oh, this sounds really great. This already aligns with what I already agree with. Oh, I already also believe this. Da, 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 da. They're not actually listening. They're talking to themselves about what we're talking about and forming judgments based on it. That's very human, but curiosity is the opposite of that. Curiosity is, I'm going to suspend my beliefs. I'm going to suspend my judgments about who you are and what you're up to and what you believe, and my judgments about what you believe, and actually become curious about what has you operate that way. Sometimes that curiosity alone can be the biggest game changer in relationships. One of the things I've noticed, that if I can give any piece of advice to any guy on listening to the podcast, or even wife listening to the podcast, is what tends to happen, that's one of the greatest travesties, is we lose curiosity in our partners over time. It goes from an interest of like, oh, who is this person? I'm dating this person. What are they about? What's going on? To, I've got cemented and concrete knowledge about this person and it's unwavering. Like for the longest time, I didn't wake up and go, who's my wife going to be today? Who am I going to discover my wife to be today? I would wake up and go, oh, she's going to be stubborn, I know, and she's going to be argumentative, and she's going to be, like something I'm going to do is going to be not good enough, and then of course, because I'm looking for evidence, because that's how that works, right? She says something, I'm like, oh, there's the evidence that she's argumentative, blah, 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 blah. Right? So that's one of the greatest travesties, is we give strangers a greater gift than we give our partners, which is curiosity. Curiosity is one of the greatest acts of service you can possibly offer.
Sorry, we'll get right back to the video in just a second. Just wanted to ask a quick question. What's stopping you from living, loving, and leading your best possible life? Do you feel disconnected, out of sync, unsure of really what it is you want to accomplish, what your true purpose is, and where you want to go with your future? Well, the ASCENT coaching program is here to help. We help you get in sync with your true beliefs, your true understanding, your true values. And from that, we help you transform from the inside out and move yourself towards the life you really want. If that sounds of interest to you, please click the link below. You can schedule a free, no obligation consultation where we'll simply get clear on the things you want to accomplish in life, maybe get a better understanding of why certain things haven't worked the way you feel that they should. And from there, we can move forward to help you become the best possible you can be. Let's get back to the video. And it's interesting how, as you frame that, talking about your partner, especially when you're talking about those types of intimate relationships that are going to be long term, we as individuals evolve. So the person that you met or married 10 years ago is definitely not the same person 10 years later, and will not be that person 10 years after that. So there's
Yep.
always a reason to be curious, because that there's an evolution that's happening within each of us as an individual. For the relationship to continue to work and build and be stronger, let's go with that. Um,
Yep.
you need to keep that curiosity, so you are engaged and you do understand what was relevant to them when they're 25 might not be as relevant to them when they're 45. But if you're not engaged and curious enough to find out why that is, what's driving that, then that's where the disconnects start to happen. And you were saying, well, I'm doing the same things I used to do, but it's not, the value of it is not there. It's not being reflected back in the same way, or however it turns out to be. Then that's where the curiosity should kick in to say, okay, what has changed? what's going on, why are we here, why are you there, what's driving, because there's always root causes, and again sometimes it's just maturity and the experiences we have.
What's also interesting is how we impact other people, right?
Yeah,
And everybody has their own agency, and we're all up to this. Part of life is a discovery process, right? But so I'm not saying like someone who does this is totally to blame for what when it happens, but a lot of times when we don't allow for curiosity, we actually keep our partners in a box because they don't have the ability to ever escape who we've already assigned them to be. So let's say my wife was actually a really nice and loving person, but I had it that she was argumentative and frustrated or stubborn. Then anytime I get evidence that she's argumentative and stubborn, I'm going to hyper focus on that. I'm going to ignore evidence of her being loving and supportive. And eventually she's going to become defensive because who wants to be always thought of as stubborn and argumentative, right? So, like, I'm not argumentative. I'm not stubborn. Like, God, right? And by that reaction, I'm actually creating her to be the version that I believe, right? That's what's crazy about it. If I believe that she's argumentative and stubborn, I'm going to be acting with her in a way that has her be defensive and like deflective, which will occur as argumentative and stubborn. So that's another aspect of it is we actually create the reality of our relationships. If I get stuck in a box, like if you're going to choose anything to get stuck in, oh, my wife is a super loving and caring person. Just watch what happens. Like just get
yeah,
stuck in that box for a month and watch how things shift based on the energy of it.
100%, 100%. It's so true, so true. I want to go back to something you brought up a little bit ago when you were talking about the agency that we have within our companies when we're an employee, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when the mindset we bring in, because that again can be translated into how we bring that home in different ways. And one of the things that every company has, or most companies, I won't say every, but most companies have, is some type of mission statement. Something that says this is who we are, why we're in business, what we represent. What value do you see in individuals creating their own mission statements, and understanding what that's rooted in for them individually, and then how
Yeah.
they go about applying that in their daily lives?
So that's a good question. It's a little bit of a longer answer, I think. Yes, mission statements are good. Next question. No,
There's a
no,
longer answer.
it's see, one of the greatest gifts someone gave me was a simple sentence. It was they were talking about themselves, and they said, I always thought life was about becoming the version of me that I'm not. So like, oh, I'm fat, I need to become skinny. I'm broke, I need to become wealthy. I'm single, I need to become whatever it is, or I'm not a good dad, I need to become this. And they said that game leaves me always wanting more and always in a like basically always it's never good enough. They said the one shift for them that made the difference was the realization that all of those things are already a part of your DNA. You're already someone who could be fit if you chose to. You're already an amazing husband or father if you chose to. Right? You're already a multi-million dollar business owner if you choose it. And so then the question becomes, how do I reveal what's already in me? So, from that perspective, mission statements are powerful, not as a declarative of what you want the future to look like, but a declarative of the present reality that you're stepping into. Like it's kind of like you've got a piece of marble, and through the mission statement or through the conversations of mission statements, you're chiseling out the statue of David because it's already in the marble. It's not like you take, all the pieces of marble and you build it into a statue of David. You have to cut away the things to reveal the statue. So same idea is like I have for the body, being, balance, and business idea, I have I am present tense statements that I actually recorded, and it's speaking life into this version I am unveiling of myself. It's one of the most powerful things that we can do. I think the problem with mission statements is that they've become too cliche, where it just becomes a throwaway statement that's like sounds cool and edgy, but it doesn't actually affect the way that I show up in life. So if I'm going to create a mission statement, it needs to be something that points to revealing that version of me that already exists. I need to own it like it's a reality, even though it's not the present physical reality. And it needs to be something that's compelling and pulls me forward. The moment it's just like that sounds nice, it needs to be altered. And I think that that's where, when we get to mission statements, people kind of miss the opportunity of the real power inside of it.
Could not agree more. And so that's why I wanted to bring that to the table, because I also have that same general feeling about when somebody says, well, find your purpose. What's your purpose? So the mission and the purpose and all of those things, as you say, have become so cliche. Um, Knowing it or having it is one thing, but living it is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference. And that's why we're talking about your frameworks and the accountability pieces and the different things that are there. That's where the rubber meets the road. And that's what's going to be important. So just having a statement, whether it's your purpose or your mission or whatever it might be, not to say that it's not a good thing. It gives you some point of clarity, but
Yeah.
then how are you actually living that from day to day is where it's really going to matter the most. I think that's very
Well,
important.
and the game here, again, part of coaching, if we look at just the broad nature of what's the point of coaching at all, it's to bring conscious attention to things. Most of us spend our lives pretty much unconscious. Or sub, like we're just kind of operating routines. Something happened in my childhood. Someone says something that reminds me of it. Knee jerk, boom, attack. Right? Like most of us, even David Eagleman, a famous neuroscientist, says that in one of his books that the mind, the conscious mind, is like the broom closet in the mansion of the mind. Right? It's so the amount of conscious activity we do on a daily basis is so minimal compared to the amount of subconscious, unconscious activity. And so coaching in that regard to me is about creating a spotlight. It's a purposeful and attentive consciousness aimed at a direction. So a mission statement, one of the most powerful ways a mission statement works, or an I am statement or a power statement, is after the declaration, you start noticing where it's not in place. So I'm like, I declare that, an I am statement or a power statement, I am a loving, amazing husband that takes care of my wife in a way that only, most men can only dream of and most women are envious of. Then I start to notice how I show up in life and go, ooh, that wasn't that. Ooh, that doesn't align with that. That's the point to me of a mission statement. It's not something to aspire to in the future. It's something to direct attention in the present to see where you're not that.
That's the alignment
Mic
piece
drop.
of it, right? Yeah. Mic drop, right? So we reached a point in the podcast where I just like to call final thoughts. And this is
Yeah.
where I essentially open it up to you and say, if there's one final thought or takeaway that you'd like to have the audience walk away with today, what would that be?
Well, if you don't mind, before we do that,
Yeah,
the
sure.
for those listening, Brian and I have known each other for a while now. He was one of the first guys I met when I first got into the business back when I was 21 years old in finance. So I'm curious, Brian, because it's been a while since we've talked. What have you noticed as a shift in me from when you first met me till now?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. Obviously, as you said, we've known each other for a while, and we got disconnected because you relocated and life went on, and we went different ways. But the biggest thing that I see with the Thomas of old versus the Thomas of today is this sense of, and it's bigger than confidence, because confidence can be shown in kind of a braggadocious way,
Hmm.
but the confidence that you show today is a confidence of, I know who I am type confidence. And that energy comes across in a very different way than it used to. So it's a very positive thing. The other thing that I would say that I see is, um, as we talked about a little bit earlier in this, that being of service, that outward focus, that it I can make a difference in multiple ways in people's lives, and just owning that. and how you show up day to day, whether it's your personal relationships yourself, whether it's clients from a coaching standpoint, whether it's clients from a financial standpoint, whether it's the little league softball team around the corner. However you can feel that you can make a difference, you are stepping forward, owning it, and showing up as a leader, as we talked about earlier, in whatever capacities and whatever ways that things need to be led. Because sometimes you have to lead from the front, sometimes you have to be real time in the moment, other times you can lead from behind, as they say. And all of that still matters as to what and how you show up in a daily basis, as well as the mannerisms and actions that you take. So those are the biggest things that I see. And the last piece is just a amount of self honesty. I mean, that as you talked about earlier, that mirror that you've held up, and it wasn't a one-time thing. You consistently break that mirror out and say, "Hey, how am I doing? What adjustments do I need to make?" So you've got that self honesty happening right now, and it gives you an aura, it gives you an energy, and it gives a positivity to you that I think people feed off of, and also drives you in a different way. So that's what I see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really, on two pieces, I really appreciate that acknowledgement, because I know, as a 21-year-old who I was compared to now, right? Now, the
Well,
second piece is that actually is that lends to the final thought then, is the acknowledgement Brian just gave me of what he's seeing that I'm doing is not by accident. It's from letting my life start to have conscious awareness and attentive spotlight, and then frameworks in which to run my life so that I can develop and grow. In other words, this wasn't by accident. It wasn't just something I got lucky and happened into. It's been a constant process of reinvention and work. The good news of that, and why I want to share that as a final thought, is wherever our listeners are in life right now, it's always something that can be reinvented with their effort and intentionality. If you're in a relationship that's not working and it's a struggle and you don't know what direction to go, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to start leading, just taking the first step and starting to process yourself and doing some of what we talked about in this session: curiosity, looking at how you show up, starting to realize how you've got your wife pegged in a corner of how you view her, and starting to open that up and be curious again, right? Those are some of the, like anything. Or on the money side, if you're currently blocking that energetic multiplier and you're not producing additional resources and you're not growing your wealth, and you've tried and tried and tried and you don't know what to do, it's an opportunity to take a pause, knowing that you ultimately, while you can't control the outcome, you can step more into power and you can build yourself with this kind of power. Last part of that final thought is what most people will never take the time. It's just human nature to pause. It's kind of like an analogy I think you and I talked about on the phone. An analogy for most people, and for a lot of my life, was it's like I got thrown into the deep end of life, right? They're just like, here you go. Like, you're an adult now, figure it out. And you're in the deep end and you don't know how to swim, and you're thrashing around, being super ineffective, wasting tons of energy, throwing your arms out, throwing your legs around, not sure what to do. And then at some point, occasionally, you just go, well, I guess this is it. And you let yourself sink to the bottom. And while you're sitting there almost about to give up, you realize you have that moment of that fight, that will to live, and you push off the floor, right? And that pushing off the pool floor in this example feels like momentum. It feels like energy. You have that moment of like, this is going to be amazing. Like, I've got it. You break the water, you breathe, you feel euphoria. It's amazing. And then you realize you still don't know how to swim. And so then you start thrashing about again. And that's, most people will go through their entire lives of that kind of process in business, in their relationships with their body, with their spiritual connection to God. They'll just over and over and over and go through that process. But if you just slow down and calm and actually allow yourself to float for a little bit and stop bringing all the meaning and the negativity and the thrashing and the sporadic and chaotic energy, you might find that there's a life ring right next to you and you just missed it.
So true. Thank you for sharing that. And that is a very relevant piece of it. Is we sometimes go through life with these blinders, and what the thing that's there to give us the grace and to save us or guide us in a better direction could literally be right here beside you, but can't see it. So the curiosity, being open, and again, as we talked about earlier, the wanting to and being willing to open yourself up and trust and be honest and be of service. All of it feeds into that being or beingness, if you want to look at it from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, I wanted to thank you. This has been amazing, and the things you're doing for helping guide men and repurpose them in a different direction from just from the standpoint of clarity and focus and saving relationships, rebuilding relationships, creating a more positive journey for themselves, a more positive outlook on life. There's no better gift than we can give, I think, is to be supportive of others in that particular way. So I'm very grateful to have you as a friend for one, but also as a common coach out there that are about making a difference for others.
I guess one additional final thought is, the idea that we're not saviors as coaches, right? We're guides. And so there's people that we're called to support, and there's people that we're called to lead. There'll be people that hear me and go, screw this guy. And there'll be people that listen to you and go, I want to talk to him, and vice versa, right? And it's just the most important thing any of us can do is speak what's there for us to speak and not be afraid.
That's the ultimate goal.
Leave it better than we found it.
Leave it better than we found it. All right, sir. Well, I'm going to cut you loose. I
All right, my
again
man.
thank you so much. Take care. Take care of each other. We'll talk soon.